Tom Hardy's Star Trek Nemesis villain role, the end of an era. When Star Trek Nemesis hit theaters in 2002, it carried with it the weight of a franchise over 3 decades old. The crew of the USS Enterprise E, led by Patrick Stewart's Captain Jean-Luc Picard, faced an unprecedented threat, a clone of Picard himself, known as Shinzen. And in this climactic battle of ideal and identity, the villainous Shinzen, portrayed by a then unknown Tom Hardy in a breakout role, marked more than just another entry in the Star Trek rogue gallery. It signaled the end of an era in cinematic Star Trek storytelling. Tom Hardy's portrayal of Shinzen was layered in ways few had anticipated. At first glance, he was the archetypal Star Trek villain, menacing, calculating, a mirror of the hero. But Hardy, even in his early career, infused Shinzen with a vulnerability that made audiences uneasy. This wasn't a one-dimensional antagonist seeking universal domination for the sake of it. Shinzen's existence was the embodiment of Picard's own shadow, a reflection of the road not taken, of bitterness formed in isolation. Hardy made it impossible to simply dismiss Shinzen as evil. He was tragic, dangerous, and disturbingly human. In hindsight, Hardy's Shinzen was a turning point for Star Trek villains. Up until Nemesis, Star Trek's cinematic antagonists often fell into familiar molds. The brutish Klingon, the logical yet cold-hearted Romulan, the alien with inscrutable motives. Shinzen was different. Hardy's nuanced performance demanded audiences confront the psychological dimensions of the villain. His silence could chill more effectively than his threats, and his controlled rage highlighted a simmering pain that mirrored Picard's own suppressed grief. Star Trek had rarely seen a villain portrayed with such emotional depth, and Hardy carried the weight of that new expectation on his young shoulders. Yet, beyond performance, Shinzen symbolized an era-ending shift in Star Trek itself. Nemesis would be the final TNG-era film, and Hardy's villain embodied the tension between old and new, legacy and change. Shinzen's very existence, engineered by Romulans but shaped by human cruelty, echoed the franchise's own struggle, balancing respect for established lore with the drive to innovate. Hardy's villain was both a literal and metaphorical clone of Picard, reminding fans that endings in Star Trek were rarely simple. Generations of characters, stories, and ideals culminated in a confrontation that was personal, political, and cosmic all at once. Critics at the time were mixed on Nemesis, often overshadowing Hardy's performance. Yet looking back, his Shinzen stands out as prescient. Hardy's career trajectory, quickly ascending to blockbuster status, mirrors the transformative role he played in Star Trek. Just as Hardy would go on to redefine villainy in Hollywood, Shinzen redefined the stakes of Star Trek antagonists. Gone were the days of static threats. The franchise's cinematic villains would now demand intelligence, complexity, and a touch of heartbreak. In essence, Tom Hardy's Shinzen was more than a character. He was the punctuation mark on an era of Star Trek that celebrated moral certainty, interpersonal bonds, and the triumph of reason over brute force. Shinzen reminded audiences that even the most familiar heroes could be mirrored by darkness, and that the end of one chapter is